Coach, let's talk about the role of a head coach on game day. I want to start with an extraordinary situation where Sherrone Moore, because Jim Harbaugh was suspended from the Penn State game, he became the acting head coach. He's also the offensive line coach, offensive coordinator, and play caller. That seems to be an awful lot for one person to handle. Your thoughts about this particular situation?
Yeah, we were there. Big noon kickoff was in State College, and Gerry, at 9 o'clock, they thought Harbaugh was going to have that injunction and was going to coach. Obviously, that didn't happen, so Sherrone Moore, you're talking about the most difficult position to coach is offensive line. He's a line coach. He's got all 5 guys, and it's a difficult position. Offense coordinator, we've said that, you've said this, and I agree with you. The hardest job on game day is not the head coach, it's a play caller. And now you just, by the way, you're the head coach. When you're hired as a head coach, you're responsible for 2 things. Number 1, develop and implement a culture, and number 2, talent acquisition, players and staff.
Right.
If you don't do those other 2, if you don't do those top 2 things, everything else matters. You throw the play caller in there now, that's a full-time job, but if you put play caller above the talent acquisition and above culture development, you're not the coach very long. You're going to be out. So let's talk about the responsibilities of a coach. There's 2 of them. When you're preparing a team during the season, you're preparing, it's called preparation. That's what you do all week. And I think that's the most important part of a head coach. That's your schedules, that's your nutrition, that's your hydration, that's making sure they're rested, and making sure there's not too much going into game plans. That's your job, and that's preparation. Once the foot hits the ball, now you're the game manager. And I wrote down these, when you're really the game manager, there's the obvious and there's not so obvious. The obvious is what? 4th down. The head coach, that's going through the headsets of the head coach. Right. Everybody knows that. To go for 2 or kick a field goal, or extra point, those are the obvious. I'm going to give you some not so obvious, and this is great for a viewer to understand that head coach's responsibility. When you're backed up, that's a critical part of the game. That means you're coming out, your offense has the ball. Do you be aggressive or not be aggressive? That has to be one man's decision, the head coach, because that can change the game. The shot plays, deceptives or trick plays, that's the head coach. You don't call that play without, or a fake punt. That's got to go through the head coach's headset. Personnel moves. Who's going to be playing tailback? Do we change a quarterback? Do we change a linebacker? That's a head coach's responsibility. Make sure your best players get the ball, and you motivate and you motivate and inspire throughout the game.
So we both agree that the most difficult job in college football is calling the game on offense.
Right.
More difficult than a head coach. So what about a head coach who decides to do all 3 of those things that you mentioned? Why would a head coach want to call plays or call defenses?
Well, there's 2 very successful coaches out there right now, Lincoln Riley and then the #1 team in the country, Ryan Day, who took over for me at Ohio State. And we had that conversation. Can you do it? Not many have. Not many have done it well. Guys like Ryan Day and Lincoln Riley are probably the best play callers in the country. That's what got them to be the head coach. And I know Ryan Day personally. I think he's as good as I've ever been around, play caller. If you keep that, you're going to take away from some other stuff. You can't sit in the defensive meeting rooms. You can't run special teams meetings. You gave the example, all of a sudden a player on defense is having an issue. You're going to leave that room and go, you got 10 other assistant coaches there on offense waiting for you. So there's advantages. What's the advantage? Obvious. They're great at what they do, play callers. What's the disadvantage? To do that, you're taken from something else.
You know, Tom Allen's another example. He was defensive coach, became the head coach when Kevin Wilson left IU, and he called the defenses. Then after a couple of years, he stopped calling the defenses, and then he went back to it. And I think some of it is who you can hire, right? How good your staff is and how you can complement the staff. The most traditional way, obviously, is for the head coach not to be the play caller on offense or defense, but Ryan Day is a great example, as you say.
And I know Coach Day has struggled with that. We've had many conversations. He's been public. He named Brian Hartline the coordinator. Kyle Whittingham, the best defensive coach I've ever been around, would call defenses at times, and I chatted with him about that. But I think ultimately you want to be the CEO, but it's hard to give up something you're so good at.